So I've started my assembly of the selfie stick, and I've got a few things in, I think a couple of joints on here. I'm going to let that swivel. It can come out. I can't rip it off. I can't spin it out. So that's all good, and that's fine. So the next thing I'm going to put together, just to show you, because there's a couple of things about it, is this piece to go on here. Now for the full assembly diagram, you can look at the website that has it all listed. So putting this together is kind of similar to the way that we did constraints with the pen. We're going to make a joint. I'm going to ask you to select the type first. This does not move in any sort of linear fashion, so this is purely rotational joint. It's like a hinge. Now when I select, so that I selected the type, now I'm going to select my two parts that are connected. I want to select not just kind of randomly on this. I want to pay attention to what's getting highlighted, and then when I click, I want to see that little disc with the arrow on the specific point in that opening that I'm trying to line up. So I'm going to use that point on that opening to line up with this point on this opening. And it's going to come in, and that is lined up, but it's facing the wrong way, and it's inside the object, so I do have a problem with that. If I go over here to connect, the third button that I can hit is flip component, and that's going to flip it around. So now it's at least in the right spot. Now the reason I picked this part as well, because it's got a gap in between these pieces. This is not a perfect fit. There's a bit of space in here, but I want to space this out. So down here where it has a gap, you can actually give it a gap, and it doesn't matter, just whatever works. So that's 0.025. That looks about centered, and it's going to be fine for me on that. So that got it in place. That has the right degrees of freedom, and it can spin there. Now it's spinning through, which I don't want it to do. So I'm going to look at my limits, and under start and stop, whoops, I want to have a beginning and end because I don't want it to go through here. Now one thing I'm going to mention, and it's going to be, I'm just zooming in and out to rotate to the side because I want to be able to see that arrow. Depending on what your settings are, and everyone ends up on a different page it seems. If it says radians, you're measuring in radians. If it ends in degrees, you can measure in degrees. If you're measuring in radians, just keep in mind that there's about 3 radians, 3.145 or 3.1415, etc., to be exact, in 180 degrees. So every radian is about 60 degrees, 1/3 of a half turn of 180, like from one side to the other. So I can change this to degrees, or I can leave it in radians, but there's a little bit of a guess and check because right now it's at 0. Now you can go in for current and use it as a testing spot. So if I change that to 90, okay, 90's there. So maybe the rotation it's got is from this orientation clockwise. So maybe I want it to start at 90 degrees. And I want it to go all the way around. So 90 plus 90 plus 90 would be 270. If I want to check where that is, I can type that in here. So that's over there. So in theory, and this could be, this could goof, I want it to go from 90 to 270. Oopsies, 90 degrees. There we go. The units are important because I think it's defaulting to radians. So 90 degrees to 270. Let's apply it. I can close that for a second. And I can see it's going to let me move it around, but it's not going to let me move past there. So that's exactly how it would behave normally. The bolt that goes in here will either be downloadable, provided, or my students, I might just have us not do this, just because getting that file out might be a bit of a pain. Again, to go through the menu really quick, if you got that in place and you got the idea for it, feel free to move on. Just going through the place joint command, pick the type that you're going to use, pick the parts you're going to go through. Remember, the first one you click is the one that's going to move. So I always think I want to move this part, click, to this part, click, and that's going to be the first click on the part that I want to move, and the second click on where I'm going to move it to. You can flip it if it's facing the wrong way. Once it's approximately in place, if you need to gap it a little bit because maybe it needs to be centered, you can nudge it there. And then with the limits, angular is talking about rotations, which could be in degrees or radians. Just pay attention to your units. And linear motion, which you can limit, would be any motion in a straight line. So that's a general overview for adding joints, specifically for activity 2.1.3, but that'll work for anything really. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.